On this Monday night, the Prime Minister's visit to a BC First Nation. Justin Trudeau's in-person apology for that Tofino vacation.
I wish I had been here a few weeks ago, and I deeply regret it.
As Indigenous leaders tell him enough with empty words.
Reconciliation starts with real action.
And residential school survivors speak their minds.
Our children deserve a good future, and our families deserve peace.
America's first Black Secretary of State dead at 84.
The world lost one of the greatest leaders that we have ever witnessed.
Colin Powell's complicated legacy. And airfares are taking off, why the cost of flying is soaring.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was told today Indigenous people want more than empty words and hollow apologies, and that he needs to do hard work to build trust and make amends.
Someone must be charged for the deaths of our children. They deserve the dignity to be named and either ceremonially or physically returned to their homelands.
Trudeau visited the Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc First Nation in BC today, a place he flew over on the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, choosing instead to vacation in Tofino that day. He's since said sorry, and today was told that is a first step, but not nearly enough.
Today is about making some positive steps forward and rectifying a mistake. It was a long-awaited moment to receive a personal hand of recognition and sympathy regarding this horrific confirmation of unmarked graves from the Canadian head of state.
Robin Gill is in Tk'emlúps with our top story tonight. Robin?
Donna, the Prime Minister finally made it to Tk'emlúps, and during his visit, the chief of the Tk'emlúps First Nation admonished him. And once again, he was forced to apologize.
I am here today to say I wish I had been here a few weeks ago, and I deeply regret it.
This was always going to be a day for the Prime Minister to appear humbled. And Tk'emlúps Secwépemc Chief Roseanne Casimir pulled no punches over Justin Trudeau declining 2 invitations to visit the BC First Nation on this year's first ever day for Truth and Reconciliation.
The shock, anger, and sorrow and disbelief was palpable in our community, and it rippled throughout the world, to say the least.
But she was still willing to sit beside him and make a commitment toward reconciliation.
Today is bittersweet.
They invited you.
3 weeks ago, Global News cameras spotted the Prime Minister on a family vacation in Tofino. He was contrite when finally accepting this invitation.
I had the opportunity this morning to apologize to her and to the community in person for not having been here on September 30th.
The political back and forth has overshadowed what this community has urged the Prime Minister to see firsthand for months, the site of suspected graves at the former Tk'emlúps Indian Residential School.
It was envisioned that it would be an opportunity for him to interact with a wide array of survivors, intergenerational survivors, and many different First Nations.
In their meetings, the First Nation again stressed the need for full, unfettered access to student attendance records from residential schools, funding for a new healing center, and more help supporting surveys for other unmarked burial sites.
He needs to understand what we went through.
Rose Miller attended the school from 1949 to 1953. At 80 years of age, she can't move on until these demands are met.
I think it's only proper that the government takes some responsibility to find the other bodies that are buried here. I'm sure there's going to be more, and they need the money to do it in all of the other ones across Canada. It's very important that we have a closure to it.
After the Prime Minister left, Indigenous leaders here say it was simply a photo op for the Prime Minister, that he offered no concrete timeline for the issues presented to him. And many Indigenous communities are watching what happens in Tk'emlúps because they too are dealing with suspected unmarked graves right across the country. Donna?
Robin Gill in Tk'emlúps, BC, thanks. And for more on Trudeau's visit and what the federal government is actually doing and prepared to do, let's go to our chief political correspondent, David Akin. David, what did the Prime Minister show up with during his trip to the Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc First Nation?
Well, he showed up with yet another symbol, Donna, in this case a commitment to lower the Canadian flags on the next National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Might be a nice gesture, but it was pretty clear that Indigenous leaders at this point are looking for more than just symbols, more than just another contrite apology.
I think we're beyond theatrics, platitudes, and words. And as stated by many Indigenous peoples in this country, we need to see action.
As your cabinet comes to be in this next Monday, do something concrete. It's really important.
Well, David, clear message there. The Prime Minister told they want concrete things, that actions speak louder than words. What do we expect in the weeks ahead in Cabinet and the throne speech?
Well, let's start with the throne speech, another symbol that's going to be read for the first time by an Indigenous person, an Inuk woman, Mary Simon, our Governor General. That's important, and it's a symbol again, but people want concrete actions. We heard today about funding for healing centers, funding to find more of these lost burial sites at residential schools around the country, and those will have to be somewhere you would expect in the throne speech. One of the other symbols right now, of course, is we've got that water problem up in Iqaluit, and that reminds us how the Trudeau government in 2015, 6 years ago, promised to eliminate all drinking water advisories. We still have 32 communities tonight who don't have safe drinking water, and so we come back again to frustration among First Nations leaders, all the hopes, all the promises of 6 years ago, and really the Trudeau government not living up with their actions.
All right, David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. In Manitoba, officials are expanding their rollout of third doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. All First Nations people living on Manitoba reserves are now eligible for a third dose. Health officials say the test positivity rate is significantly higher on reserves than in the rest of the province, and they're urging all of those eligible to get a third shot.
First Nations communities are seeing breakthrough cases of COVID-19 among people who are fully vaccinated. Due to the context within First Nations communities, it's essential that we decrease transmission as well as preserve our local healthcare capacity.
The BC government is being urged to speed up the rollout of booster shots for seniors. Third doses are being administered to residents of assisted living and long-term care homes, but several facilities are already dealing with significant outbreaks. Over the weekend, 3 new outbreaks were declared in the Greater Vancouver area, including this residence in Chilliwack. All 3 facilities have introduced enhanced measures to help control the spread of infections and have closed their doors to new admissions. Nearly 3/4 of the residents of another long-term care home in Burnaby have now tested positive for the virus. 3 people there have died, and health officials say the number could be as high as 10. Saskatchewan's health authority has begun transferring critically ill patients to Ontario for intensive care to help ease the strain on Saskatchewan's hospitals.
Our numbers are reducing. Our hospitalizations have reduced the last 10 days, but our intensive care numbers continue to be high, and that's what's precipitating today's decision.
1 patient is being transferred today, and up to 6 transfers are expected by the end of Wednesday, with longer-term plans being assessed. The number of patients requiring intensive care in Saskatchewan is far exceeding the number of available beds. Some ICUs are operating at up to 153% capacity. Premier Scott Moe has requested federal help to staff the ICUs and relieve some of the pressure on frontline healthcare workers. U.S. President Joe Biden has paid tribute to Colin Powell, saying even in disagreement, Powell was always someone who gave you his best and treated you with respect. Powell, a retired 4-star general and former U.S. Secretary of State, has died of complications of COVID-19 at the age of 84. His family says Powell was fully vaccinated but had multiple myeloma, a cancer of plasma cells that suppresses the body's immune system, as well as Parkinson's. Both conditions made him vulnerable to the virus. Powell played a pivotal role, especially in the aftermath of 9/11. And as Jackson Prosco reports, his legacy is complex.
He was a soldier, a diplomat, and a man who broke barriers. To many, Colin Powell exemplified the American dream. Growing up in Harlem, the son of Jamaican immigrants, he went on to advise 4 different presidents. Powell joined the Army and served his country during 2 tours of Vietnam, becoming a general. Ronald Reagan tapped him as National Security Advisor in the final days of the Cold War. President George H.W. Bush made him chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the first black person to hold the post. He oversaw the Persian Gulf War in 1991. His strategy of overwhelming force became known as the Powell Doctrine.
Our strategy to go after this army is very, very simple. First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it.
His presence and earnest demeanor made him one of the most popular and trusted names in America.
By the time he retired from the military, he was arguably the most respected and celebrated American in uniform.
Republicans and Democrats tried to convince him to run for president. His wife, Alma, talked him out of it.
Colin Powell as Secretary of State.
It was under President George W. Bush that Powell was appointed Secretary of State, another first for an African American. Despite his reservations about invading Iraq, he relented.
Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction.
That speech to the United Nations arguably won the battle for public opinion and would become one of his greatest regrets. As Iraq turned into a quagmire, Powell admitted to relying on faulty intelligence, acknowledging the painful stain on his record. In his later years, Powell positioned himself as a moderate, endorsing Barack Obama and serving as an informal advisor. In 2020, he endorsed a Democrat again.
Joe Biden will be a president we will all be proud to salute.
Are you optimistic? Always optimistic.
Powell's career paved the way for a generation of future leaders, including the current U.S. Secretary of Defense.
The world lost one of the greatest leaders that we have ever witnessed.
In his later years, as American politics grew more divided, Powell kept a noticeably lower profile, avoiding the spotlight and the sting of his Iraq blunder. Asked how he might like to be remembered, he once told an interviewer, "All I want to do is judge myself as a successful soldier who served his best." Colin Powell was 84. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
There is a development in the case of sexual misconduct allegations against one of the top men in the Canadian Armed Forces, a day after his accuser spoke exclusively with Global News. Military officials say the decision not to prosecute Admiral Donald does not mean the claims against him are unfounded. MacDonald has claimed he's been exonerated, and he's fighting to be reinstated as Chief of the Defence Staff, a post he held for just 1 month before accusations against him emerged. As Abigail Beeman explains, the whole thing has left the military in leadership limbo.
There were several witnesses.
Several witnesses, says Navy Lieutenant Heather MacDonald, who saw her alleged sexual assault. One of them tells Global News she's telling the truth, and he told that to military police. But military police said the investigation did not produce evidence to lay charges against Admiral Donald, who recently asked for his job back in a letter to top military officials claiming his exoneration.
I take big issue with it because that's simply not a fact. There was no exoneration of any sort. Maybe it was expected by him, and it's a most generous interpretation of the decision not to prosecute or not to pursue these allegations.
It's a misperception, and I think just sort of a signal that he simply wants his power back. That bold kind of move is just such a, again, a testimony to how out of touch he is.
Late Monday, military police issued a statement saying they wanted to clarify no charges laid does not mean that the allegation was unfounded. There are now calls for an independent review of MacDonald's case. But of course, the push to handle sexual misconduct cases outside the military is not new.
I would ask that Parliament start taking some of the recommendations they have been given for action.
This is unprecedented. It's a leadership crisis that I know of no other large nation, G7, G20 nation.
Some believe the Prime Minister will wait to name a new cabinet before sorting out the CDS role. And top of the cabinet speculation list is whether Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan keeps his job.
I do not have faith that a prime minister that has kept his mouth shut on this issue for most of the year while the military has been in crisis, I don't think he's going to be the right person to pick a minister who's going to lead on this, because he himself hasn't led on this.
Global News put a number of questions to the Defense Minister and Prime Minister's office in the wake of Lieutenant Heather McDonald's interview. We asked Sajjan if he'll be calling for a review of the case. Sidestepping the question, his office told us anyone is free to make a complaint to the Military Police Complaints Commission of Canada. The Prime Minister's office wouldn't answer by deadline on the question of a review or when Justin Trudeau expects to make a decision about who becomes the permanent chief of the defense staff. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
The abduction of 17 missionaries in Haiti, including a Canadian. Coming up, the gang being blamed for the kidnappings. Governor General Mary May Simon is on her first international trip representing Canada. Simon was greeted in Berlin by German Chancellor Angela Merkel. She'll take part in several events, including roundtable talks about Arctic exploration and a trip to the Frankfurt Book Fair, the world's largest trade show for literary works. A powerful Haitian gang is believed to be behind the kidnappings of 17 missionaries over the weekend, including one Canadian.
There's no functioning government, and the gangs rule Port-au-Prince and the country at large.
The missionaries work for Christian Aid Ministries. It says they were abducted after visiting an orphanage, and among those being held are 5 children. Kidnappings have become more frequent in Haiti since the assassination of the country's president this summer. The FBI says it's now assisting in efforts to locate and free the hostages. Ahead, the soaring cost of flights as air travel recovers from the pandemic. As travel rules ease, more Canadians are taking to the skies, but those booking flights are encountering a troubling trend. Airfare prices are reaching new highs. Ross Lord explains what's behind this surge in fares.
For Carol Wamba, flying from Ottawa to Africa is emotional.
It's very tough. I lost my mom, so I'm going because I lost my mom.
At $2,000 a ticket, she says her airfare is almost double what it was before the pandemic. She'll be flying alone.
I'm really sad because my son would have loved traveling with me. He's a special needs child, and I always travel with him. But this time I couldn't do that because I didn't have enough money.
Flying from one part of Canada to another has also become more expensive. The aviation data supplier Cirium says between July of 2019 and July of 2021, the average price of a round-trip ticket within Canada went up by almost $100 to $532 plus taxes. Why are fares even higher than before the pandemic? Cirium says there's pent-up demand, but only half as many seats available, because Canadian Airlines are still offering fewer flights and using smaller planes.
When the system senses that seats are selling out fast, it automatically raises the price because it says, well, there's very few seats left. We don't want to give them away. We want to charge more for them so that those who really need to travel can actually get a seat. And so a lot of it is actually algorithms.
Cold calculations and cold comfort for travelers looking forward to moving more freely.
Unpredictable. Depends on what day you choose to fly.
But I've noticed that the flights within Canada are super crazy high.
The airlines themselves are breathing easier now that the devastating impacts of COVID-19 are beginning to ease.
Travel restrictions have rolled off. Confidence has been returning. I think the government's vaccination mandates do provide more confidence for people to get traveling again. So things are certainly moving in the right direction.
When things will move in the right direction for consumers is unclear. Analysts say prices could keep climbing, possibly through the Christmas holidays, until airlines switch back to larger planes and more available seats. Ross Lord, Global News.
Residential school survivors and their families speak out. Next, what they told the Prime Minister. Returning now to our top story, the visit by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to the Tk'emlúps to Secwépemc First Nation in BC. Most places he goes, he commands the attention of the room. He's the one everyone looks to and listens to. Today, it was his turn to listen. Here is some of what Tk'emlúps residential school survivors and their families had to say.
When I left that school up there, I didn't know how to love myself. I didn't know how to love my children. My 5 children taught me how to love them. And I pray that we can have it in our hearts to start forgiving and start working and making that truth and reconciliation a path for all of us, for the children of the future, for the children of the past, for the children of now, the present.
Since the age of 5, I feel like I have been in survivor mode, and I'm 53 years old now. It has been a long road. We hear about the loss of culture and the loss of our language, but as children growing up in the wake of the residential school era, we lost so much more. We lost our parents. Our moms, our dads grew up in an institution, a regulated, cold institution that forced through violence not to have feelings. Our parents were not able to freely show love or emotions. We rarely experience our family members dying of natural causes, old age. Our deaths are from addictions, overdoses, violence, suicides, chronic health conditions, and poverty.
The anger and the frustration is hard to swallow. My mom went to this institution, and I would say to my mom, "Hey, Mom, you know, May 27th of this year, 2021, the children uttered these words to the world. You found us. You found us. We are here because every man, woman, and child, mother and father, grandmother, grandfather, aunt and uncle, you warriored up. You survived over 100 years of this institution. We're still here. We're still here."
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this view of the sunrise on Mount Baker in Washington State, seen from Mission, BC. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.